Here we are, justice under a tree, the traditional African way of resolving disputes. Out in the open, nothing could be more transparent than that. That's the theme of the whole building. Justice is open, it's for the people, it's seen, it's believable. Not in a constrained building representing the power of the state. We know what you've done, we're on to you. But a building that was saying welcome. And you'll notice the pillars are at angles. We call them the Pious Pillars. When Pious Lange went on to become Chief Justice, saw pillars at an angle in a court. And the architects explained, it's more organic. They actually hold the roof better if the angles are well calculated. But to get away from the formalism, the rigidity, everything solid in place, something open, organic. The Pious Pillars now stand with dark red bark, kind of mosaics at the bottom, and then light green higher up to indicate the leaves in the sky. And you'll see the sunlight today is flooding in. It moves across the floor, goes up, and it's not only providing natural illumination, it's putting you in time. You come into this building, most modern buildings, if it's 6 in the morning or midday or midnight, the illumination is the same, it's electrically controlled. Here you're in real time and in real climate. And if it's dark outside, if it's raining, you can hear the rain, you can see the water coming down, and you feel you're in a real universe. Judges are real people dealing with the lives of real people in a very serious way, but never forgetting it's real people out there who are affected by the decisions.
You may have noticed that Albie is missing much of his right arm. Albie was the victim of a bomb planted by the apartheid police in a car he was driving while he was in exile in Mozambique. Instead of seeking vengeance for this act, Albie declared, "Roses and lilies will grow out of my arm." Albie was a tireless anti-apartheid activist, and at the birth of South Africa's democracy, he became one of the Constitutional Court's very first judges.
And here we are, the judges. Look at us. We're not in gowns, we're not wearing wigs. We're not even looking important. And each judge was allowed to dictate his or her own portrait, how you want it to be photographed. To emphasize, each one of us has our own conscience. We swear allegiance to the same constitution, to the same people, to the same law. But each one of us brings to bear our lives, our conscience, our intelligence, our thought, our legal understanding. And you find there's one judge not wearing a jacket. He's wearing a tie, not a jacket. The big advantage of starting with nothing, you can invent yourselves. We weren't entering a building already established under apartheid with the heaviness, the imported quality of our justice, the solemnity, the inducement of fear, the patriarchy, the pictures of dead white male judges up on the wall, so banal. One day I'm going to be a dead white male judge, there's nothing wrong with that. But if that's all you see, it's saying only men mattered, only whites mattered, a simple thing like that. We could invent ourselves, so we invented this building with its own ambience. It was a decolonial building. We'd never used the word decolonized, but our heads were decolonized. We wanted a new building for a new democracy. The same people, but renewing themselves in the light of the Constitution. And I must say, this building stands up so well. When we see it on television now, important cases being filmed here, I just get such a charge, not just from the erudition, the importance of the decisions, but from the ambience, from the boldness, from the confidence we had in our architects, our artists. We're not copying a building from America or a building from England or from Germany or anywhere else. We're creating, as we got our own constitution from our own struggle, we're creating our own building to house justice in our developing South Africa. I used to walk in as a judge from the back and take my seat. Now I'm walking in as a member of the public. When I came, I had a lift every time, dispensing justice, upholding the basic rights of the people. And when I visit now, I have a lift every time. This is just such a gorgeous space. And I see the Nguni cowhide skins, traditionally associated with the serious people in society. All the same and each one different. The judges all the same and each one different. I'm reminded of when we were seated, counsel addressing us, his or her eye level was the same as ours. In fact, now I'm standing higher than I would have been seated as a judge, to emphasize the equality of all before the law. I see this lovely dappled carpet just hinting at justice under a tree, not too heavily. I see the flag at the back. We started off with two feeble flags. There's nothing worse than a drooping flag. And we had the idea of a bold South African, proud South African flag, beaded by women from an African cooperative in Durban, and their names are on the flag. And my colleague Kate O'Regan said, "Who built the pyramids?" quoting the Brecht poem. It wasn't Rameses II. We don't know their names. We know the names of the people who beaded that flag. And I used to hate flags. Country or death, blind obedience. I loved our flag. It came with our democracy. It's possibly the most improbable flag in the world, with too many colors and crazy design, but it came with our democracy. It represents our democracy. And every time when I left, I would make sure my gown just touched that flag. I see these bricks on the wall. These bricks are from the awaiting trial block, the one precious building of this old prison that we had to destroy, but we kept the bricks. The very bricks that lock people up are now protecting the rights of the people. I remember when we had an opening ceremony and there were about 30 judges from South Africa, from all over the different provinces, and they saw the bricks. They thought we'd run out of plaster. And I had to explain, these are historic bricks. We leave them as they were, rough, unfinished, like life is rough and unfinished. I see the gallery at the top. It's for the press. And the photographs of the court in session always are taken from there. The press quickly mumbling their reports. Constitutional Court found the president in dereliction of his duty. It's a humming, buzzy place, but a convivial space. The justice under a tree theme in the physical structure of the building. And possibly the most remarkable feature of this court is this ribbon of glass that runs all the way around. And it's a reminder, justice is not cloistered, it's not cut off from the world. There are people out there. And I'm always amused when I was sitting on the bench and I would see, you just see the knees and thighs of people walking by and you can't tell if it's black or white or brown or man or woman. And I thought that is our non-racial, non-sexist world. It's humanity going by.
Albie was not only intricately involved in the conceptualization and realization of the building. Together with his colleague Justice Yvonne Mokgoro, he also set about establishing the court's impressive art collection.
At our very, very first meeting, Arthur Chaskelson gives out different tasks. And he asks Ismail Mohammed to do the rules of court, Laurie Ackerman to do the library, Tolly Madala to do the gowns. Everybody's given a task, and it only leaves Yvonne Machor and Albie Sachs with nothing. So he says, Yvonne and Albie, will you do decor? And he gave us 10,000 rand. I bumped into Cecil Scottness, and I'd seen and admired his work at the Grahamstown Arts Festival and elsewhere, doing big, beautiful wooden kind of gouged, painted pictures with a very strong African quality and feeling. I said, you know, Cecil, we're opening our new court. We'd like a nice piece of art. Do you have any ideas? And he very shyly said, well, there was something that might interest us. And I went to his house afterwards. He'd actually almost completed this picture, which he'd made his representation of the spirit of democracy. And he was shy about it, and I thought it was marvelous. He said, yes, there's a young guy whom he's teaching how to do this kind of artwork, named Hamilton Badaza, working in the library at the University of the Western Cape. He'll do something with Hamilton. And we got this work. Young, very inexperienced, but extremely talented artist with an elderly, very experienced and also very talented artist. And they did it in Cape Town. He demanded no fee for it at all. We paid for him to come up. He managed to get the timber donated. He did this work. They fitted it in next to the opening, the entrance to the old court, the first court building we were in. Would it be acceptable or not? Arthur Chaskelson wasn't sure. This isn't your typical artwork that you get in a court. You expect to see the Magna Carta, boring. Blindfolded woman, Scales of Justice, boring. And Arthur consulted with a friend whom he trusted more than he trusted me. Thumbs up, Albie. And this opened the way for everything else. If there'd been a negative response to this, we would have ended up with the blindfolded woman at the Scales of Justice, boring non-art art. And it gave us the courage then to invite other artists to contribute. These tablets behind me here are by the conceptual artist Willem Boshoff. And he had the very remarkable idea of getting a kind of black marble and scratching on it the number of days, weeks, months, years that Nelson Mandela and the other Rivonia trialists spent in jail. Prisoners are supposed to mark off the days on the walls. He's the artist marking off the prisoners, marking off the days on the walls. And it's such a simple testament to their endurance and their courage and their vision and idealism. It's not triumphalist. We won, long live victory, long live the struggle. It's very compact, it's very intense, it's very moving. My friend Dennis Goldberg, we'd been in a youth movement together. He spent 22 years in jail as one of the accused. And I brought him here. I didn't tell him. He was very, very moved at seeing this dignified representation. If you look at the Mandela days, you can see here a week, 6 days, a stroke through. Painstakingly he carved all the days. And you can read the total here. Nelson Mandela, 11th of June 1964 to the 11th of February 1990, 9,377 days. And so it is with each one of the accused. Balancing out that statement, the final words of Nelson Mandela at his trial, on trial for his life. It is an ideal which I hope to live for and to achieve. That's the ideal of democracy and equal rights. But if needs be, it's an ideal for which I'm prepared to die. Nelson Mandela, Rivonia trial, 1964. The Law Society of South Africa decided they were going to offer us some interesting pictures for our walls. That's the way they saw it. And they gave us big pictures of Kruger National Park with giraffes and elephants and the boss and so on. Boring, 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 boring. And I said, Mr. Law Society, give us the money, the equivalent. And then I saw this particular piece. And it's the total opposite of these feeble pictures of the veldt and grazing animals and so on. It's carved from one piece of wood by an artist I hadn't heard of before called John Beloy. And it's called the Sentinel, a spirit. It's almost like an African spirit guarding the court. And it has an elegance and a beauty, and for me it represents a kind of idealism soaring up into the air. Again, anything that destroys that sense of automatic formalism, the chains of formalism, of routine, of habit, of non-thinking and non-challenging. Anything that does that, to my mind, gives a kind of an energy, a lift, a sense of freedom to the whole ensemble that makes up this particular environment. But it didn't end there, because I went up to his studio and I saw a marvelous representation of Godzilla. It was after floods. The Limpopo had been in flood, and this huge tree was washed down and got trapped in some rocks. And he retrieved that tree, and he wanted to deal with the violence of the water. And he'd seen the Godzilla films of this crazy creature emerging from the ocean floor, and he carved Godzilla. And if you look outside, there you'll see Godzilla. I think it took them a day and a half to track it down. They had to go very, very slowly. And we got like 16 security guards to put it up in place. Poor Godzilla. Not fair, 16 against 1. Anyway, there it is. It was too powerful, too mighty for the court itself. It just wouldn't fit in anywhere. So it's a kind of a guardian outside there. Very powerful, very strong, very violent and very funny. It's not terrifying, but you don't mess with it. Sadly, John Beloy, one of our great artists, was killed in a car crash. He never saw that work here. Strange thing is, we didn't make a space for an art gallery, but the whole building becomes not an art gallery, it becomes a building infused with art. Some of the most exciting art, in fact, we had competitions for the lampshades, the nosings on the stairs done by an African woman potter. Outside, instead of a wall, it's like another prison, these movable pieces. The amazing light that you get filtering through the patterns and shades are beautiful, and then we put in artwork. If you have funding, then you have a procurement committee, and usually one strong person dominates, or it's lowest common denominator. But when you don't have money, the collection collects itself. It's serendipitous. And the one thing that unites it is love. It's given with love and received with love, all the artwork. And so we ended up with a very extraordinary collection. It's a collection of its time. I'm not sure if it's going to carry on into the future or if it will be a period collection. I'm off the artworks committee now. Other people have taken over. Even before you're in the court, this is just different. The lettering's different. It's the name of the court in all the 11 official languages. It's not carved in like Roman heavy carving. We developed a very special font It's called the Constitutional Call font, based on graffiti, the writing of my colleague Zach Yacoub, who's blind. Before you've even come into the building, you realize there's something different. It's not formal, it's not pompous, it's warm, it's friendly, it's inviting. And then you come to the front door. Recognize sign language. Themes from our Bill of Rights carved in sign language. The names of the artists here. 27 different elements from our Bill of Rights. The intrepid guides say, well, the 27 years Mandela spent in jail, that's pure coincidence. And then, if I have time, when I'm touring, I take people to the Tumilifeni sculpture. He's the greatest artist I've ever known. I met him in exile. And he was coming back to South Africa in 1991. He went to Tower Records to buy some music and he dropped dead. He never came back. He never met his daughter, who was born after he left. And we discovered there was some work of his in a foundry in upstate New York. And I traveled there with the daughter. We saw the work. It was much smaller than this, pieces of plaster beginning to disintegrate. And a South African sculptor, Vanessa Solomon, who trained at the Mercator School of Art, she was in New York at the time. And she met with Isaac Witkin, South African sculptor who became quite famous in America, who'd worked with Dumile and said Dumile was the greatest sculptor he'd ever known. And so they did an enlarged model of this work. It's called History. And Dumile explained that in history some people pull others along. But what I found so interesting is the others are not simple slave drivers. They also puzzled. We're all puzzled. History is complicated and kind of messy. It's unfair. But in terms of who is strong, affirmative, there's no doubt about it. It's those who labor, who work, who produce. You know, they are the strong people, even if they are shackled. And it's just a wonderful piece of art that becomes even more wonderful when children are on their way to school. They walk past, we judges can see their little legs through the window.
South Africa's Constitutional Court stands on a site that was formerly one of the country's most notorious prisons. It is infamously known as Number 4, the name of the terrifying unit in which black men were jailed. This site was one of torture. It was one of unspeakable human rights abuses. The significance of building South Africa's apex court, an institution that has at its heart the sanctity of human rights, on blood-soaked ground cannot be missed.
This was the site we chose for the first public building of democratic South Africa, the Constitutional Court. And we chose the site of the Old Fort Prison, which had been a site of pain, of oppression. The Brits locked up the Boers locked up the Brits, the Boers were on political power, they locked up the blacks. And we said, enough of locking each other up. A constitution means we live together in one country as equals, united South Africa. So using this site of total negativity turned into positivity became powerful in itself. And it's near centre of Johannesburg. It's accessible, but above all, it represents the triumph of hope and spirit over despair and bitterness. And we don't forget the past. We don't say it didn't happen. We don't say let's move on. We acknowledge the past. We acknowledge the elements of the past that still reach into the present in so many ways, but we're not trapped in the past. We can change. And we are ourselves the ones who bring about the change. It's not people from outside. It's not a messiah. It's not some miraculous group. It's us. We have to do it. Instead of finding some lonely, beautiful spot to put up a court separated from the travails of the world. We placed the court right in the heart of trouble, of distress, but as a space that radiates hope and possibility and rationality and reasonableness and fairness, and that's that building down there. It doesn't represent the might of the state. It's a solid building, it's a friendly building, it's an inviting building. And here at the side and on top of it, the remnants of the old awaiting trial block, the one building we had to take down to make space for the court, but we've kept the staircases. And on top of the staircases are these towers of light. 1, 2, 3 towers of light, so that you can see the building from afar. They're like beacons. They don't interfere with the buildings, with the architecture, but they symbolize that expressivity of what is positive in the world.